Welcome everyone to the How to Make Money panel. I think you guys arrived at the right spot. Hopefully we'll have a good discussion today, but jokes aside, my name is Kellen. I'm on the SmartThings business development team. We, over the years, have had the fortune to really get to know our partners over here, to really understand how much investment our partners, and also at Samsung and SmartThings, how much we've all invested into IoT already. So today's discussion, we want to really talk about how do we jump forward to the next stage and how do we actually monetize what we build and leverage what we build. So with that, I will hand the mic to Ralf.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ralf. I run global business development and partnerships. And what we felt today, rather than hearing from Kellen and myself, we wanted to invite key partners to talk about how to monetize in IoT. And I'm glad we have a very diverse set of panelists here. And just to frame the topic again, so there are like various analyst forecasts spanning from 300 to 500 billion the next years in revenue in IoT. But the question is still how to monetize. And what you hear today are various different views on how to monetize IoT. So yeah, let's quickly introduce the panelists. Felicite, if you start.
How do you do? I'm Felicite Moorman with Stratus. Stratus provides access, energy, and automation to multifamily and student housing buildings. So think door locks, thermostats, lights, leaks, specifically in the space where there are multi-resident use cases and, frankly, disparate interests between your residents and your ownership. We're in 250,000 units across almost 1,100 buildings here in the United States, and we've launched in Japan.
Hi, everybody. My name's Nick Wald. I'm from Vodafone. For those of you who don't know, Vodafone is a very large global telecoms company. We have more than 500 million customers around the world. We operate in 29 core markets, as well as probably another 50 or 60 partner markets. And really, my role within that organization is about defining the services around our consumer IoT propositions, and particularly what does that mean for vHome, and I suppose fundamentally, how do you monetize that service?
All right, so awesome. The first question really I would like to ask you, each of you, is why IoT? So what is the problem you're trying to solve for your customer, and why are you investing into IoT?
Yeah, so when you think of your major controls company, traditionally you think Johnson, Siemens, and Schneider. And then you have companies like SmartThings, now Samsung SmartThings, who saw gaps in the marketplace, saw need. And they strive to fill that need. And I think that any of us who are inventors, technologists, especially within the IoT, are discovering needs that can be met with these technologies. For us, Johnson, Siemens, and Schneider, God love them, were far too cost prohibitive for more complex buildings, like multifamily buildings, student housing buildings. Bringing SmartThings into this from a resident perspective and being able to provide a platform from a management perspective really filled two problems. It allowed those who live in apartments to engage in smart home technology, but at the same time, kept the control of those devices when those vacancies occur and there's turn in those units in the hand of the property manager, who has the opportunity for net operating income increase. So I think it's about filling a need. And the Internet of Things is absolutely an opportunity for anybody who's interested in inventing, certainly, to engage there.
Yeah, absolutely. When have you started that journey?
So I actually kicked off my technology career with JASCO, which is GE's consumer and home electronics brand, in 2010, participating in 8 national rollouts of IoT, specifically home automation, using any of their 3,000 SKUs at my disposal. So when you think about what SmartThings did, they were the pioneer in bridging some of these protocols that we're familiar with, Z-Wave, Zigbee, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, into one hub. And that was, at the time, it was profound. And so, I haven't seen anybody do it as well yet. And that elimination of consumer confusion was something that I was combating all the way in 2010. And so a decade later, we use these technologies to eliminate decisions on the part of the consumer and ease the friction that Internet of Things still exhibits from time to time. So for me, it's been a decade.
Okay. Nick, over to you.
I suppose I should answer this question in 2 parts. The first is, if you think about IoT, the fundamentals of it are a network layer. And Vodafone is a network company. We have an enterprise IoT backbone that is used in more than 50, 60 million devices already. But the migration to the consumer IoT product is one that's fairly new for us. And it's one we've, today in fact is our anniversary. V by Vodafone was launched precisely 1 year ago today. And we are focused in this space because of the numbers you kind of mentioned right at the beginning, Ralf. The volume of connected devices is, astronomical and growing faster. Our customers live in homes which will increasingly become connected homes, and whether that's connected with a thermostat or with a voice assistant or with a security solution or with some level of home automation, we firmly believe that presents a vast market for us to address, and a vast market we can bring the skills and the customer focus of Vodafone to, that will enable us to monetize and to add value to those people all over the world. So for us, it's a no-brainer. The volume of customer use cases just grows. The number of devices grows. The number of potential services just grows. We feel it's on us to develop this as a fundamental part of Vodafone's future business.
Do you see customers paying for that service and for those use cases?
Yeah, I think that's kind of my job. So I better say yes. The reality is, if we look at provision of hardware and some capabilities, particularly if you look at the voice assistants today, there's very little service associated to those voice assistants. They do 3 basic things. They'll play music for you, they'll set a timer for you, they'll provide some simple queries, access to the internet. And people will buy the hardware based on that. But unless you've got a model that is going to build on a service that customers really want to use on an ongoing basis, if you can't build something that creates more utility for those customers than the cost of that hardware, then it's a one-shot deal. You buy something, you won't then pay for the service, you won't pay incrementally for the service, and that's not really our model. And I guess perhaps because we come at it from a telco background where the expectation is you're going to pay for the ongoing access to that service, which is typically a connectivity charge, then our viewpoint very much stands from, if we can't turn it into a service portfolio, then we're probably not that interested.
Yeah. Patrick, over to you.
Also, you're familiar with set-top streamers, set-top box, TV, TV, TV devices like Shield. So you want to connect it and stream media content, music. We came to SmartThings with the fact that the product that we have has voice to believe in devices, but a streaming device is in your living room. It is normally almost the center of the house, off the kitchen. And this is a device that's always on very low power, 2 watts, 3 watts when it's sitting there. Even if the TV is turned off, the device is still running. So integrating the technology that allows you to talk to that device and then connect to the rest of the other devices in your home or even outside of your home was a logical extension of the reusability that we have for that device. We'll talk about it later. I'm a strong believer in voice as the need to access, to allow common people to access connectivity. And we had that in our product. The product as we see was the SmartThings technology that allowed you to connect to so many different types of devices that have their own protocol. The user doesn't want to deal with that, and that is the implement that's in this.
Yeah. Do you see the SmartThings capability as part of the NVIDIA Shield as a means to differentiate or as a purchase driver?
For us, well, we don't have a revenue directly associated with the SmartThings business on the device. It's part of a partnership that allows the whole product to be successful. But the Shield is seen in the market as the ultimate streaming machine. It didn't have that complete functionality on the SmartThings side. So this allowed us to stay at the top of the offering to be able to say this is the ultimate device that allows you to differentiate between income. That was the component for us on the product.
Nice. Jonathan, how about you?
For us, we approached it in the manner of trying to solve a problem, trying to disrupt the typically stagnant industry in multifamily. Usually takes years to change. I came at it from a perspective of a manager company in the IT department. The owner came to me and said, I want smart apartments. And the only thing I had in my home was a SmartThings hub. And the philosophy we wanted going forward was not to pigeonhole residents into a certain limited ecosystem or what have you, which is, at the time, right now it's very fragmented. Back then it would be more fragmented. So SmartThings had the most, we thought the most opportunity. Seeing that residents want more and more of the smart home technology to differentiate their homes, save energy, and on the marketing side, a huge opportunity for builders to help lease up these new apartments.
Very cool. Yeah, so I think, one thing that I want to talk about with everyone here is that, as I think about all the investment that all these great partners and us are making in IoT, right? For example, Samsung alone in 2017, we invested $14 billion in R&D across AI, IoT, and different initiatives. We have over 65,000 engineers working on these initiatives, and they're obviously very important. And, it's an area that we do want to invest in. However, when I think about it, I feel like currently there hasn't been very successful monetization stories yet on a scale that I think we're all hoping to achieve. So my question for Patrick first is, for NVIDIA, right, as a sort of gaming background company, how did you guys actually decide to come into playing the Android TV box market and then adding smart home capabilities, AI capabilities? What is that journey like, and how are you thinking about monetization? I think the struggle for a lot of us to think through is this the right time? Should we still be building, a best user experience to still aggressively acquire users, or should we start monetizing on what we've built already? I think that's a hard question, but maybe Patrick can shine some light on that.
As opposed to some other platforms, we don't own the operating system. And if you have a Roku or an Apple TV or others, assuming you know that the company makes money on advertising that is done through what they know what they do with the device, because we are the hardware manufacturer, we pricing, as you probably know, on the platform. Our strategy is to use another service. As you know, NVIDIA is in the gaming business. And we have, for people like me that don't have a PC, a high-end PC at home, we have clouds, computers that can be used remotely with our streaming device. So you connect with your Shield as a terminal to those cloud devices where you can play the latest game. Think of it as the Netflix of gaming, where you pay a certain fee and you play you want during a certain time. So this is where we're heading in terms of monetizing the platform. We want to grow the user base so that we can justify this big investment that we have been making. And I was one of those when I saw this technology originally, I didn't believe it. So I was looking at a Shield, and it was playing this amazing game that I knew was not possible with a Shield, the technology, the chipset that's inside of this. So I was looking on the game.
It's a big box.
It all came from the cloud, and the interaction is actually extremely quick. The network connectivity that we have today are as good as if you were to play locally on a PlayStation or an Xbox. The latency, that's what you call it, the time between the time you decide on interaction, and then the information is sent to the cloud, and then the cloud, with those geographic chips that generates the new field, a new frame for you, and sends it back. This is all done in real time. It's not like watching a movie where you stream everything. It's even buffered to ensure not everything is in real time. There was some challenges for that. So this is the direction, to your question, where we are heading in terms of monetizing this technology. And the other part of the monetization is to do partnerships with some of the partners that have applications that are installed on our device. They do have revenues with their services, and we offer visibility for those services. So it's an opportunity for us to have a rev share scenario where we can get part of their revenue, and that's typical.
Very good. Very, very interesting. And maybe we switch gear a little bit and go to Felicity. Obviously, as Felicity was explaining, I think primarily your customer base is B2B customers, right? Versus Vodafone and NVIDIA over here, which primarily the customer base is B2C, so your consumers. So how are you thinking about, obviously you've been in the industry for a long time and you've seen the consumer demand picking up. But from a B2B customer base, how are your customers thinking about how they want to leverage the smart home technology, and how does that actually translate into value for them, and how does that translate into value for your company?
Sure. So I like to use the example of hospitality. And for anybody who's looking to get into the space, Internet of Things, don't confuse hospitality and multifamily because of my analogy. That's a death sentence. But the hospitality industry shifted, and I'm looking around the room, a couple people will remember this, from a hard credential, so a key, to your smart card, which probably you all have on you immediately, in about 5 years. And I mentioned age, it was about 30 years ago. And that happened nearly overnight for an industry to adopt a new technology. If you think 5 years for every single hotel room in this country to shift like that, that was a fairly profound shift. And so when I looked at this market and I looked at B2B, I said, why hasn't that technology been embraced in multifamily? And in addition to that technology, the smart door locks, which is really what hospitality door locks are, they're just smart, electronic, not as smart as what we're doing in multifamily, but they had their moment. Same thing with thermostats. Why aren't multifamily units using thermostats, especially during vacancies, when there's an opportunity to save as much as $40 a month for the property owner then? And then you look at lights and leaks, and there's a plethora of opportunities. So I asked the questions. I did my research, of course. I spent years asking my business partners, the property owners, the portfolio managers, why they hadn't embraced these technologies. And they gave me 5 or 6 really obvious and clear reasons that I knew if I could solve, I could give them, and this is how to monetize IoT, a return on their investment for that technology. The minute that you can provide a true value, the minute that you overcome cost as an obstacle with real opportunity to increase your net operating income, you have a solution that will be rapidly adopted. For instance, Stratus, 250,000 units in 3 years. Adoption of IoT is approximately the same rate at which Comcast launched Xfinity in 2010. So if you build it, they will come. And B2B enterprise is one of the fastest to adopt True Value. And it was obvious for us.
And how do you think about the pricing model? Obviously, as property managers, right, you build in,
Sure.
you embed a lot of the cost in there already, and then you have high turnovers. How do you think about managing that piece and actually talking with your renters, right, your occupants about the value that smart home bring for you in addition to what actually brings to the property managers?
So we had to make a decision early on. Did we want volume? In other words, did we want to install in every single multifamily and student housing building across the globe? Not the US, or did we want a Class A exclusive $300 thermostat play? For us, the answer was obvious. And we priced our product based on volumes. When you have 250,000 units paying you a little bit, it's a much easier sell than having 2,000 units or 3,000 units paying you so much they have to increase their rents based on your business model. That's a failure in this space. Because it's real estate. And the real estate market, as we all know, well, I don't think there's anybody younger than 2008 in here. As we all know, the real estate market fluctuates. And if you're building a model that requires your property owners and managers to raise their rents, you've built a failed model. Maybe not today, but as soon as the market shifts, and those of us who lived through that real estate shift understand, you lose. And so if you build a model where the value is in the return on investment, then you win.
Got it. Very insightful. Thank you. And Nick, maybe over to you a little bit. Obviously, Vodafone as the second largest carrier in the world, right, has a lot of customers, needless to say, and both from broadband, fixed line business to mobile customers. There are a lot of opportunities to really talk to your customers, and you engage with your customers on a daily basis, right? They use your service and they pay the bill. And how do you think about creating a service that, Felicite was mentioning, creating a true value? I know you spent a lot of time thinking about this because we worked together on a couple projects, but how do you guys approach? Do you do a lot of user research? Do you talk with, experts about what to offer? Do you look at competitive solutions? How do you actually approach in launching a solution that you think you might be able to monetize?
I think for us, the key element there, as you say, is the research. I mean, we spoke to thousands of people when we were looking into how we would bring the Samsung SmartThings relationship to market. We knew from almost every survey in every country that we did that the thing that people felt the most compelling reason to buy for was a security type solution. And the smart home element of it was a nice add, but it wasn't necessarily the driver in the markets we looked at. So when we looked to build the proposition, we knew it had to be in that security space. So we then sort of took that view and looked at what the genuine security companies did today. That gave us kind of a feel for what expensive looked like, and obviously what worked well for a relatively small subset of people. And we knew we weren't necessarily at this first tranche trying to win all of the market everywhere, but we were aiming it more at the mass market. We used to talk about democratization of security, about enabling it for more people in a DIY context, because we still believe that was the compelling case that would drive people to want to pay for the service. And that was the other part of it, was to look at what drives the idea of a repeat fee. Why am I going to continue to pay a service on a month-by-month basis? We come from a connectivity background. You always want to have connectivity. If you're going to have security, you kind of always want that security to be available to you. But precisely how that works and what elements of that you're going to offer is a test and learn. We've been live 6 months or so in some markets. We're live in the UK only about 7 weeks, 8 weeks. And so we take very seriously all the feedback we get from our customers, recognizing that we are on a learning journey to work out what works best. And not just for overcoming the service fee element, which Felicite is completely right. If you can't demonstrate a genuine value, you're only going to sell to people who get excited by the technology. And that's nice, but they aren't the majority. They aren't the numbers you're trying to talk about. It has to be credible to families, to individuals, to the mass market. The other part of that is, what's the upfront cost? What's the hardware fee that you're expecting customers to be able to fund? And here I think we have experience in people buying hardware, whether that's mobile phones or broadband gateway routers, when they buy a network contract with us. And so that gave us a sense of what we thought was plausible. We've probably found that we were probably a little bit wrong on that. The value, and we're not, cards on the table, we're not trying to make any money at the hardware. It's about trying to get activations. It's trying to build a user base.
Good, I'm going to sell you some hardware.
Yeah.
Strategic partnership happening right here.
But the reality is, even with that mindset, the feedback we get frequently is, I'm not really certain I see where the cost is in this. And that's because people don't understand the technology. They don't understand what it is they have under the, what they're getting is those billions of dollars of research you guys are putting in. They're expecting this to be cheap, in inverted commas. And that's not necessarily always the case. So one of our challenges in monetizing is doing both things. It's develop services fundamentally that are appealing to customers at a price point that is sensible and credible and disruptive, I would say, particularly in the security space. But it's also working with you guys and working with other technology partners to work out how we create bundles of service that really work, really work from a financial perspective.
Right. And from that, I guess leading to that, with creating bundles, right, that actually work, and how do you think about tiering the levels of service and products and different bundles to create enough value for some, but you also want to upgrade customers to a more premium tier? I think, as in general, how we think about the good, better, best strategy. Is that what you're thinking about as well?
Yeah, it is, but I think we've got to be careful to not think about it as a mature market. There's a danger when you start getting a lot of experts in a room that they all go, oh, what a great idea. We'll have 3 different tiers. Within those tiers, there'll be different options, and it will meet this whole marketing segment. Everybody will have a Vodafone solution that they can take. Great. 5 years, we will definitely have that. But if we spend too much time focusing on that now, we lose a bit of the laser focus to learn precisely what works in a given market. And we're not just looking in one location. I mentioned earlier the different markets we're live in today is, our big 4 in Europe, with the UK, Germany, Italy, and Spain. Well, they are all very different markets. The Italian customer base is an awful lot of prepay customers. 70% of the market's prepay. So the concept of them having a subscription model that is probably as costly as their prepay model is doesn't look so appealing to that group. We're trying to finesse and work out how we make best use of those different markets to develop the solution. But it is absolutely true to say that we anticipate over time building capability that does allow us to address slightly different segments. For those of you who don't know, what we've done with the core proposition, the safety starter kit, we've bundled 4 bits of hardware, we've packaged it as a single unit, we've put it as a single SKU that customers can ultimately buy from one of our stores, and ultimately that will be sold through other indirect channels and other activity. But you can also buy multiple other devices from a soft bundle type of a setup. And I can see very much that we will look to develop different versions of kind of the soft bundling approach. I think we may have talked about it before, but I want to help customers choose the right solution for their home in a more dynamic way than we're able to do today. But it's definitely, I know it's something we would like to do. It's not something that today is going to turn it, it's not going to turn on another 200,000 customers in the next quarter. It's something that's on the journey. And I suppose if I'm going to talk about the journey briefly, I would say that the commitment here is recognizing that this isn't going to be overnight. We're building a market where we celebrate when one of our competitors joins it as well, because it helps raise the awareness.
Yeah.
And that's slightly new for us. We're used to being, almost all of my peers are in telecoms and have not been in a telecoms business in the 80s when mobile phones were new. We've always been in a mature model. We're now trying to develop a new marketplace which could potentially be as big, but we're starting as if we had the first mobile phones.
Yep.
And we just got to remember that.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And Jonathan, from a product evolution perspective, right, as you obviously were a SmartThings user already when you were starting the venture, but from a product evolution perspective, how have you guys evolved your product to actually meet the demands? Because as consumers, renters, customers know more about the technology, start using the technology, they'll have new requests, they'll have new things that they would want to see from you. How do you approach that, and how do you evolve your product over time?
So I think for us it was making a good decision in the beginning to put the onus on the companies that can do that, such as Samsung. We understood early on that technology, what it was in 2014 to what it is today, some of these devices that are out right now just didn't exist. Would we take on the responsibility of maintaining all that, or allow Samsung to invest tons of money in doing that?
No pressure.
Right. So what we do is we listen to our property managers, the leasing professionals, and take a look at the landscape of the technology that's available, and we are constantly trying new things. We just can't be afraid to fail with the way that technology changes. So we just continue to try new things and try to stay up as much as we can on the capabilities. And if it makes it to the product side, it's because it provides that return on investment, kind of what Steve was saying. Because this is real estate, there's only so much that they're going to be able to charge.
I see.
So we try to balance that.
Got it. And do you experiment with pricing models with different customers and try to evolve that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first started, the model was direct to the consumer. And so it made it an option to the residents and see what the penetration would be. Then we changed it to more of kind of the builder, the property manager selling it, and that became a hassle for leasing professionals. Now it's kind of expected in the community to move in and have the technology in the home. So it's kind of an experiment.
Yeah, one question I have is about scalability, right? So IoT is very much a scale game, and Nick, probably you are best to answer that question. You just mentioned you have launched in four different European markets, right? UK, Germany, Spain, and Italy.
Yeah.
Can you apply consistent business models and product experience across those markets, or you see like different flavors in your markets?
There are different flavors, but I would say the underpinning driver is around awareness of what you can do within a smart home context, in particular for this, that we see difference in uptake driven a little bit by the underlying expectation in the market for what smart home can do. And I think in several of our markets, they, at least one, Alexa wasn't launched in that market. And love them or loathe them, the voice assistants they're the vanguard, they're the beachhead into this space because they represent something that people didn't have before. And we see in markets where they've been there for several years, there is an implicit understanding about what a smart home should be able to do. Now they may be wrong, they may be they may think it can do magic when it can't really, but the reality is without it, it's always a much harder sales conversation.
Yeah.
It's more accessible for the users too.
The voice is good, and obviously it integrates with the voice platforms. You can do various different things. If you haven't got that, if that didn't exist when we have a conversation about this wonderful security product, they understand security product, they don't really understand how this is going to solve that problem. And that I think drives us to have different strategies in different markets, and we'll continue to do so. We've looked at, we've probably looked at 7 or 8 European markets as locations to launch in. We've chosen the big 4 because they've got the largest customer base, but they're also the furthest along the awareness journey, but it still isn't very far. Some of the smaller markets we have will have potential, but do they have the potential to pay back on that return on investment right now? Maybe, maybe not. And I think one of our lessons has been making certain we treat each market with a degree of rigor as to what is going to work, not just in 10 years at the end of the business case, but what's going to work today. Yeah. And therefore, lots of conversations which end up being holding conversations that say, yeah, we can see the value, but you're not quite there yet. And then other markets which will trip over into they're ready, they're good to go, the volume is there, the commitment is there, and the opportunity sort of almost at a macroeconomic level is there. In which case that becomes the driver.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about learnings. So great stories, but what are the pitfalls? What are the challenges you had to overcome the last years?
I think that was a phenomenal point regarding scaling. Every market is different. Even in the United States, San Francisco is not Houston, is not New York City. Yeah. So I think we definitely hit some, let's call them speed bumps when we launched in Japan. We thought we had a clear understanding of the market with a strategic partner who had the same. And we saw hero products here in the United States launching home automation. It wasn't necessarily the service providers. It was either a novel device that had a tremendous opportunity to provide value, or it was a system like SmartThings that bridged technology so that consumers didn't have to make hard decisions, like which protocol do I use? That's not something consumers should have to choose between. And so I think that in scaling, minding your markets is hugely important. And that's been a tremendous lesson for us. I don't buy into the good, better, best scenario anymore. Also, I think it can present its own pitfalls, but modularity is still important. Specific packages that allow everyone to adopt and feel included, I think is really important. And it took us a little bit to understand that one size doesn't fit all, certainly globally, but even in the United States. So that was a bite or two off the apple.
More learnings?
Yeah, more learnings, yeah.
Okay. Patrick?
One of our learnings, challenges in learning associated together was, as our product, the Shield set-top box, is available in multiple countries. The SmartThings integration is currently available only in the US. As we were looking at extending the IoT integration, the smart capability integration to other countries, the challenge was the brands of the components. The smart components are different here in the US. Nest, everybody knows about Nest. You talk to Nest, somebody in Germany, they're like, no.
That's not a thing,
so
right?
Totally different. And if you don't have the compatibility with the local brand of devices that are popular, then you're not going to be successful. That's been the challenge in the learning, is that in order to get there and be successful, you need to be compatible with the products that the people use in those countries. And we learned that they are very different in terms of smart home products. So that's been a bit of our challenge.
And Jonathan, I know that when we were chatting earlier, that you were mentioning that obviously you build an integration with our backend, right, with the SmartThings platform, which we're very happy that our platform is adding so much value to partners. But at the same time, we don't always have the necessary tools or the necessary features that you need in order to create the service that you need. So can you share a little perspective on that journey and be candid with us on how we can improve or what we can do to make sure that we're providing a more seamless experience so that we can jointly deliver a better consumer experience?
Sure, yeah. So for us, some of the challenges that we faced early on was taking a retail hub and bringing it to business stuff. So when we meet and say, I'm putting 320 hubs into apartments and trying to figure out, in a retail scenario, you've got one hub, and that hub
like monetization, as we think about it, usually the sequence, you do user acquisition first and then you figure out how to monetize. But I think in the B2B channel, it really is a very interesting opportunity for us to use as a channel to acquire users, right? Like what you said, these customers who may or may not have heard about us, move into apartment, start experiencing the product before they even know about the brand or the technology behind it. I think that's really the beauty of the whole sort of flywheel effect of how we can actually utilizing something that we're already monetizing, but still use that as a channel to acquire new users and make sure that we continue to improve on that.
Yeah. Nick, over to you again. So learnings.
I think there's several learnings I'd touch on. I've mentioned it a few times. I think you can't underestimate the awareness curve, the difference between early adopters getting it, being excited by it, and the mass market. The other thing I'd say is there's an inherent risk in an immature market in terms of one without that awareness, that your analysis and all your good research arguably includes a fundamental flaw, which is by having that research, you immediately create 100% awareness. So even though when you say these are the different things we're thinking about, these are the competitors, how does this bundle, how does this service work, that response rate is great, but it assumes a level of awareness because you've just trained them on all of those different capabilities. So when you then apply that into the real world, there's a degree of realism that has to come with building that basic awareness to get to that point. And particularly with a new market, I think it will come. I think the difference between now and 5 years ago is huge. I think people are starting to really get it. But a key learning for us is really the patient build-up of that awareness and what that's going to mean over time. And like I've said before, the long-term commitment is there because we know that market will grow. It's not to be too challenged right now when it's not necessarily completely where we want to be, but it's also about how do we grow that as fast as we can. And so I think that's a key piece. The other one, which I think is interesting, is the speed of technology is faster than the speed of adoption. So we have it's a slightly funny story. So we did an advert which we showcased the great technology that we've got from our partners, and it's really good. And within 4 months, it was all out of date because it wasn't the latest version of the hardware, and the explanation of what we've got is now better, and it's all good. But the cycle time to replace an advert is not 3 months. I mean, there was a lot of money put in building that. Yep. That will be used for a period of time. So I think we have to be more dynamic with the pace at which we drive that awareness as well. And that's going to be those key things. I think the final one is how adaptable you need to be to customers' demands for particularly things around data privacy. We see within the smart home, you're creating a lot of personal data, creating a lot of value, hopefully, for those people, but explaining, re-explaining, reinforcing, and being certain of how you're managing that data and the privacy that goes around it, I think is really fundamental, because it is a barrier at this point to some people.
And to add to your second point about how fast the technology is moving, in the build infrastructure, this is a challenge that we get back to us every day. Like, okay, I'll install this thermostat today, but I know tomorrow a new one's going to come out. Someone's going to make an announcement, and this will be, for all intents and purposes, obsolete, or at least yesterday's toy. And again, I think that's where SmartThings is hugely important, because, again, bridging those protocols means that there's a greater capability of adopting a greater variety of devices for this build infrastructure. If you buy a door lock or a thermostat or any number of devices for your home and you tire of them, you change that out. And maybe it cost you $300, $200, $100 to do so, but you did it and it's one. In the build environment, it's $300, $400, $500. And that's simply not feasible. So in creating the opportunity to actually choose the most up-to-date devices, eliminate some of the planned obsolescence that's been so prevalent in consumer and home electronics. That's a truly great opportunity to tell a different story that's been told in the technology marketplace to date.
Yeah, look, and I'd go on and say that as devices, people aren't going to replace most of these devices that we have. Because they're designed to work for a really long period. One of the fundamental reasons to work with a company as good at manufacturing as Samsung is there are a lot of companies that come up with great, unique little ideas, but when you actually put that into practice at volume, you find that the build quality is challenged. The outputs aren't necessarily where you want to be, whereas
hardware is hard.
Exactly, right? What you realize working with the Samsung team is that the hardware is rock solid. It works all the time. And what that means is that people aren't going to be replacing this very frequently. They will be slowly adding to it, and so the services need to adapt to those elements of it.
Absolutely.
But it equally can't be you've got 3 sensors and you want to add 4 more, well, it's going to cost you more money now per month because that's not how people think. It'll be like the services, I'm looking after my home, that costs me this much. We will increasingly want to be able to add more sophisticated services if you add more devices, but it won't be fundamentally changing what they already pay for.
Do you let your users add their own smart devices, or
Absolutely.
do you leave themselves
No.
the ones that you've approved? Or
No, there's the works with SmartThings badge is fundamental.
Yep.
But again, one of our founding principles was precisely not to limit people, because we looked in the market and saw the companies that had sort of failed or tried and failed went in with this is the 4 things you can have. And it might be quite a neat use case, but that was it. We're not hardware manufacturers. We don't know what the next best device is that we will want to add to the SmartThings ecosystem, and we completely concur with Samsung's view as expressed earlier today. It's about an open ecosystem. It's about taking the best of what's out there and fitting that into that ecosystem and then providing a services over the top of it. So no, I think we fundamentally believe that we want to have as many open things as we can.
Yeah, last question, I guess. So it would be great to hear what you value in the partnership with Samsung, and maybe areas you need going forward to make this a success from Samsung, where we can help.
For Stratus in particular, the global capabilities of Samsung and SmartThings is a huge driver of adoption. Our portfolios aren't simply US portfolios. They're rapidly expanding globally. The economy, obviously, is a global economy now. It's not a nationalistic one. And so that said, I think it's important that the partners that we choose have the same mentality going forward. And then again, the exquisite hardware. Like, you cannot flub the hardware when you do 300 or 500 units at a time. Interoperability is SmartThings' real value for us. And then when you look at the broader Samsung portfolio of capabilities, you have Samsung Pay, you have Samsung Health, you have all of these opportunities to integrate smart appliances, your TVs, your displays. And our buildings have displays. There's 300 TVs. What a great opportunity to use that as a hub and get away from, maybe a device that is relatively passive from the perspective of a resident, and sell in this glorious television that they show off to their friends. That's a little bit of a different play. And so when you think about including 8 different divisions of Samsung onto one platform and working together and selling that through, it's a very different model than selling a hub per unit. That's you really start to have Samsung buildings. Yeah. That's pretty sexy.
Yeah, it is. Nick?
Echo the positive things. I don't want to spend the whole time telling you how wonderful you are.
Ditto, move on.
Yeah. So you also asked about things you think we could do more of. I suppose it's more of the same in terms of continuing the drive to better, cheaper technology that does the same kind of services. We know from our own price sensitivity analysis, we get the price point low enough, people just can't get enough of the stuff. They do see the value in the services that they get. I'd like a little bit of, I know we spent earlier talking about Bixby and AI, but I think more sophisticated services come from more sophisticated management of the event and information. It's not just a if this then that capability. That's sort of where we are today. So the future and how that more complex environment works with multiple sensors coming together so that an event drives a more holistic view of what's going on will create the environment for us to be able to manage more complex services. So I'd like to look at more of that. That's okay.
On the topic of the words with SmartThings devices, we're a publishers. We've integrated with from SmartThings. We don't sell specific devices. We recommend you see what comes from SmartThings or what's approved with the words with SmartThings. One observation I've seen is that maybe a little bit more education to when devices are being added to the family of works with SmartThings so that people can be encouraged to look over to what they had already looked at, that they were so these number of smartphones, these number of devices in each of the categories. When new devices are added, if this is being promoted, it gives the opportunity for us to promote the technology, say, hey, if you didn't know, this has come up, and without sacrificing, obviously, the quality of the devices that are being accepted on the platform. And I saw earlier in the presentation that the program works with SmartThings is being enhanced with more tools for people to self-certify and assistance from the SmartThings group to help with that. So I'm welcoming that a lot to continue to grow. But we want to, we at NVIDIA, we want to be ahead of the curve in terms of technology. So whenever there's a new partner or new device that comes in, it's an opportunity for us to promote that.
Great.
Jonathan?
So, for us, I think the value for Samsung comes in the ecosystem. We're big on premium device. We wanted residents, when they come to a community powered by IQ, to feel that they can set their automations, they can add their TV to the mix, they can put their Arlo cameras that they had at their previous home in their downside, allow them to make it their home, and in the hopes that they'll stay a little longer, especially in this market where, luxury apartment homes and everybody has a granite countertop, things like that. We really want them to have an ecosystem that they can truly make it their home. And I think that's the value. When I'm having conversations with builders, the staying power of Samsung is huge. The multi-family, it's not a lot of startups get the opportunity. Because the first question they ask, like, what's exactly, how long is it going to be around? Am I going to have to change? Well, if I mention Samsung is not going to. So,
Do you have anything to add, Ralf? Learnings?
Sorry?
His learnings?
Your learnings.
Our learnings.
I think my learning is, I think at the end, as a business, you need to decide with whom to partner, right? So, and it's very often it's a make or buy decision, right? So you can make a lot of stuff by yourself, or you can partner with somebody who is investing heavily and has all the capabilities, has the brand, has the ecosystem to help you to make that a success. So I believe the partnering approach is what has worked best so far in smart home. The do-it-yourself approach hasn't really worked, and it's very much a big boys game, right? It's about big money, big investment, big brands. So that's why I believe partnering is very important. So that's my learning.
Great. I guess with that, we can open up for Q&A. Any questions from anyone in the audience?
You get to have a microphone. If that's not incentive, I don't know what is.
You guys talked a lot about how nascent the market is, how fragmented it is, maybe a lack of understanding. Where do you balance the need to actually personalize or actually focus on the consumer and get some level of understanding versus the monetization focus and scale? I think, where do we put the consumer in this whole world of new technology?
You know, for us, we really try to give exceptional customer service to residents, understanding that this is not technology that we expect that every resident, when they get in, they have no idea what SmartThings is. And so putting that extra superior customer service kind of helps us keep the consumer in mind. We can get kind of, blinded by the business side.
Yeah, I think from a Vodafone perspective, it's always put the consumer first. It's always making certain that we provide the support they need. It's recognizing a little bit that we're not trying to monetize for the sake of monetization. We're monetizing because we need to have a sustainable business. But it's a sustainable business with the consumer at the heart of it, delivering a service that's of value to them. Because at the end of the day, if that doesn't work, then we'll close it down and do something different. But we'll committed to staying the course to prove that point over a number of years.
And I think it's important to ship something and then iterate. Yeah. As opposed to sit on something. The feedback that you get, and you mentioned this earlier, you know, now you have 100% awareness because you've created this monster, or baby, if you will. And so in that moment, you now have feedback that may or may not be as relevant as those who are giving it expect. Nobody's lying to you, but they certainly aren't using it until you ship. So from a consumer perspective, the sooner you can get real feedback, the better you can create your product. And sometimes that's expensive. So.
I wanted to just add a little bit on Samsung's perspective on this as well. I think, yeah, personalization and, you know, building a great product is, you know, first and foremost our biggest focus. But I think, you know, like what Felicite was saying, that we also want to start experimenting what is sticky with customers. And I think everybody can agree that building a great product is the foundation to monetizing. And if I think about myself as a consumer with my own experience, pay Spotify like $9.99 a month, but I'm very happy. Like, I don't want the service to ever stop, and I'm very happy paying that, right? And I think at Samsung, we want to be able to create a smart home experience that customers are so happy with that they're willing to pay a bit extra to get even more convenience, more personalization, but having a very solid product definitely is our core focus at the moment.
What would be the key takeaways from each of you guys' road to where you are right now? What things would you do different, or what things would you do faster from what you have learned?
Shall I take that for the start?
You go first.
Thank you. For me, I talked a lot about awareness, so I think the thing we want to do faster is we want to approach different channels. I think we probably came into this very confident in our ability to sell through our thousands of shops. We've got that capability, let's focus on that, make perfect sense. We've got retail sales footprint, we know the footfall, focus there first. I think the learning has been people today aren't coming into our shop saying, I want a smart home solution. They're coming in saying, I want a mobile phone, and we're selling them a smart home solution as well, because it's interesting and we're trying to focus on that effect. So what we're going to try, what I think we will do more of, is expanding that footprint. So yes, of course, you focus on our retail footprint, but also look at our indirect channels much more. And again, to try and help move that conversation faster.
One of our learnings was that as a hub, that our device is acting as a SmartThings hub in addition to being streaming. We learned that getting the people to jump into the smart components is encouraged heavily with promotions that are done with partners. Like, for example, buying a light bulb and buying a thermostat or and as a company, promote this to our own audience and say, hey, you can get SmartThings with this thing at a discounted price. Will encourage a lot of people to actually jump inside the opportunity as opposed to let them wait their own research. So we will get these, but having this extra financial motivation for a new technology like this has proven with the numbers we've seen when we did those promotions to increase very significantly the market.
So just from my perspective, I think what you were talking about earlier with strategic partnerships. You know, when you partner with a company the size of Samsung and SmartThings within, there's an opportunity there to build something better together. And I think that spending more time on the strategy of how that happens so that everybody is on the same kind of page when you go to market. I think that's hugely valuable and time well spent as opposed to time just kind of grinding out code. And I think that that's from a learning perspective, you go as fast and hard as you can at a startup out of necessity. And to our successes, it served us, but I think sometimes to slow down for a minute and really consider where you're at and what you're doing is valuable, especially where your strategics are concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of echo what you were saying. I spent about 2 straight days listening to the feature that
Yeah.
turned out to be just 95 situation. So just take this a little bit of a step back, focusing on the feature that can correlate to service revenue, and focusing on that, and obviously making sure that kind of trickles down to that. Approach Samsung earlier and try to build those partnerships earlier and share findings or research on the community.
And from a SmartThings perspective, I think as much as we closely watch the market and see how the tides are shifting, we still underestimate how fast the market is moving. And I think over the years we've been doing a lot better in this, and if you attended some of the earlier sessions, we're releasing a lot more new tools for our developers to actually be able to integrate with us faster. But I think that journey hasn't been very easy, and sometimes we end up working on our everyday, very tactical, fixing things, maintaining things, and forget about how important it is to upfront invest into building the tools so that we can actually scale with the market and be able to dynamically change with the market, so that when new devices come on board, we have an easy way for them instead of waiting for us to build a trade or a schema in order to onboard a device from that perspective. Anything? Add, Ralf?
No, nothing to add.
Cool. I think at the back.
Thanks for the panel speaker. It was really great. Just had a quick question with AI and IoT converging right now. Where would you see the ripe hanging fruit in your individual markets kind of coming out? And actually, Patrick, if you wouldn't mind starting with NVIDIA, essentially, where's the key aspect of where the growth is for 19?
I'll start by answering my personal hope that with the direction this is going to go. From a usability perspective, AI will be what's going to make smart home components grow in the domestic and potentially the business areas as well. For example, in my house, like everybody else, there's the turn the light on in the kitchen with dinner time or something. You need to know the exact wording of the name that you gave to those devices to do an action on them. I'm in the kitchen. If I say turn on the light, why don't the lights in the kitchen turn on? I have to say the name of the light, etc. This is where artificial intelligence, this is probably a simple example, but getting the intelligence to just make a decision in your behalf if you don't use the right wording, the accent, the name of the things. We've done that a lot on some NVIDIA in other fields where analyzing images, analyzing situations to create what the expected result is, I believe that this is where the AI will help a lot in the home, is to go to execute the things that are expected without having the right words or the right context.
Yeah, I think for me it's almost doing away with the need to somebody create the automation. That it should effectively learn enough about how a household works, the dynamics of it, in a way that is just orders of magnitude more sophisticated than we are today. You know, I talked a bit earlier about the evolution of events from an if this then that to a if this then what's going on, then what am I going to do with that information, which is all sort of fuzzy logic based on what do I then know about that person, that individual. From a telco perspective, we know where your mobile phone is. So if an event goes off, I'd like the system to start saying, well, where are the mobile phones related to this household? And then starting to work out what the right course of action is going to be. That ability to make a decision based on different competing bits of logic is beyond us today, but it's kind of where I feel AI provides the intelligence behind the IoT systems of the future.
Yeah, and just to echo that, again, this is future. I'm going to put in a request ticket to Samsung and SmartThings right now. If you can work on the smart home AI, I'll work on the whole intelligent building AI. Because for me, it's about enterprise. Everything I do is focused. The resident will be the natural beneficiary if I make an easy life for the property manager. So whatever I can do for the property manager will trickle down. To the actual residents and enable residents to have a more delightful experience within an apartment. That said, that will be my focus for AI, and the opportunities are tremendous. In the commercial infrastructure space, we see tremendous, it's not quite AI yet, but to your point, automations that have been written that mimic what AI will become. In the multifamily space, if you can imagine maintenance people not needing to click through, but just knowing where they're going next, or having buildings shut down pieces of themselves gently to eliminate wasted resources of any type. The opportunities are endless. And I really think that this is where we're moving, kind of Internet 3.0. It's suddenly, I think, going to be machine to machine again. It's IoT, but it's really kind of throwback. And all of these sensor networks and all of these build infrastructures are what's going to create those opportunities for AI to really come into the marketplace and make change in our lives. And I'm bullish on it.
I think AI is something that we're going to look at for the benefit of our businesses, allowing a refrigerator that may go bad to notify the property manager, the supervisor. Even going as far as notifying your distribution that part and that part ships to you right away. So focusing on that, and that in turn goes down to the consumer, because you may be on vacation and let's say your home is flooding, your property manager, after they came in, they notified you that they were remote, and they saved your home from being flooded. So I think those are the things that we're going to work on an AI perspective, while also being mindful of the privacy aspect of it too. I think we have a responsibility to the consumer side to make sure that because we allow them to bring their own devices, make sure that things that are gathered, I specifically give permission to allow us to do that, or to say, it's a little bit of balancing.
Yeah, hello, Kevin Jones here. Also from an operator. My question would be, you were talking about partnerships. So we love also the Samsung products and the SmartThings, but our customers are also using different products. So what are we doing in this direction to bring, I would say, a convenience experience for those who are already having other systems? What are your plans in this direction? Partnering with others, or?
So, if I understood correctly, where customers already have an existing service, smart home, how do we address those kind of customers? The reality is, our approach would be to promote the services that we have. We do have a longer term view of being able to apply our services more generically. But the reality of the marketplace today is there are not enough of those customers compared to the greenfield of customers that don't have anything or who are don't already have that technology in their homes, that it probably doesn't make that much sense for us to focus on them right now. We'd arguably look at anything that can integrate. So the SmartThings stuff will work with Alexa, work with Google. We can integrate into those platforms that provide some of these services. So as we get more customer traction and more sophisticated, we can support them. But I guess we would probably start from a position of saying the market's so big out here, worrying too much about that set of largely early adopters it is probably not our focus right now.
And just to add on that a little bit, I think, it's important for all of us to work on conveying the value, right? I think we're all very comfortable in upgrading our phones once a year, once every 2 years. And consumers are used to that, right? It's not that your phone is not working anymore, but something else came out and it's better. But I feel like in the smart home space, when you have a system, and obviously it's a sunk cost at that point, but consumers don't recognize that. But I think fundamentally is because we're still not conveying the value that we're creating with a new line of products and doing a good job in convincing them to come over. So education in that is very, very important, and all of us should, invest more into that.
I mean, if I came to you and said, I need you to be able to migrate all the rules that someone's built on their own system and replicate them in a Samsung system without them having to touch it, you'd throw things at me, because it would be very complicated to work out. And so the answer would be, well, how many customers is this going to affect? What are the devices underpinning it? I just think it's not worth it right now.
I think for future purposes, though, you're going to see some really interesting things out of Silicon Labs, the chip manufacturer for Zigbee, who recently bought Z-Wave. I think there are some opportunities there to get rid of this, our hub does this and this hub does this. I think you're going to see some conglomeration of technologies here, and this hopefully issue of multiple hubs in a house goes away, and it won't be VHS beta. Nobody in here knows what that is. It won't be one winner, but I think we'll definitely see some bigger players than others coming forward.
The hubs it's the software, right?
Yeah.
The technology underneath it won't really matter. If you could do the hub in the cloud,
yep.
Why does it matter?
Yeah.
Over here.
Yeah, Jay, just scream it.
Hello. Great discussion so far. I enjoyed it. So, kind of like, so I bought a house a few years ago, and if I had an option to buy the home as a smart home, would have been amazing, right? It wasn't even on the table, right? That's one thing. Second thing is, so I want to see where that future is going with talking to new home builders and things like that. Second thing is, if it's not built as a smart home, you know how sometimes they give incentives to buy the home and you get designer credit? Would that be part of, instead of getting new like countertops or marble, like, hey, we can make your home a smart home as one of the options. So kind of want to see where that's going as homes getting more, instead of me going into like a store and buying, oh, I can buy the thermostat or that. But hey, you know what? I walk into my house first day, it's already smart.
Yeah, so I did an interview yesterday with the National Association of Realtors, because they are seeing now people buying homes that are smart, and the question that they have as realtors is, much like a swimming pool, is this a benefit or a detriment? And right now, the kind of thought is that it's, it has some wow factor. But I have a friend, who may work at a chip manufacturer, who bought a smart home and then couldn't control anything in it. Like the account reset, it was a nightmare. And yet, yes, absolutely. And then at the same time, you have builders like Lennar, who in 2010 worked with a door lock manufacturer, Schlage, to install Schlage Link and the various devices with which they were working at the time into their homes. That was in 2010, that was And so today's home builders, Toll Brothers, Post, Lennar's off the charts now, they're all doing this. You'll buy smart homes in the future, without a doubt. Will you like it? I don't know. Like, that's really the question is, do we really want smart homes, or are these devices meaningful to us? Kind of my opinion is that they're generally, the device itself, unless it's a hero product, is not that important. But when you walk through an apartment home and it has smart, you don't say, ooh, I would, but that's not the blank thermostat, ew. You say, oh my God, that's so awesome. That fixture that I don't have to buy, that you bought and invested for me, I can now use and reduce my own energy costs and let my dog walker in and use all these concierge services that are coming into play in multifamily, much like hospitality. But yeah, the homes, you'll buy smart homes. I don't think you'll buy smart thermostats anymore. Sorry
if you buy a SmartThings smart home, you'll definitely like it.
Yeah, I think having it put together
And then what do those people expect to go buy? What do the residents who've been using smart apartments, or students in student housing who are using smart dorms? It's really off campus, so they're not dorms. But what do they then go into the marketplace expecting to buy? Like, that's a huge opportunity. And I think that Samsung SmartThings is onto some really clear strategy when it comes to lifetime value of that customer.
All right.
That's
a wrap. Thank you so much for attending the session, and thanks for the panelists for joining us today.